Welcome everybody, we've got another 38 cards to review from Shimmering Skies. We're going to start off with a Pete card, which is a Pete referee, and the ability Whistle is very fitting for the art. When you play this character, opponents cannot play actions until the start of your next turn. Very, very fascinating ability. I think that this is definitely got potential to see some competitive play. Of course, with an Amethyst deck, there's definitely the potential to replay this multiple times. It's going to be a really good card to sing Friends with as well. So you could play Pete on turn 3, stop your opponent playing any actions on turn 4, sing Friends with it, bounce it back, replay it a little bit later on. You could play it on turn 6 to deny the Be Prepared, for example, which could be a really, really interesting dynamic. Obviously, at the moment, in Emerald and Amber, you have the ability to deny the Be Prep if you play an Ursula or Bare Necessities on turn 6. Unless they top deck it, whereas Pete you could play on turn 6, and even if they top deck the Be Prepared exactly at that moment, they wouldn't even be able to play it then. So I think that's a really, really interesting card and gives Steel a different way of playing around cards like Be Prepared, which is really, really fascinating. I think this one's good. I really do. 3/3 stat line, quest for 1 is 1 lore less than a vanilla card. So like a Mickey Mouse from set 1, for example, is a 3/3 that quest for 2 with no ability. So to lose out on 1 lore for this ability seems really good. I like the look of this card a lot. I have to say I love the artwork as well. And it's the Whistle, very fitting theme. So awesome design on this one. I like this card quite a lot. Up next we've got Who's With Me. These cards were revealed just today, so they're hot off the press. The first ones we're looking at. This is an action in Ruby. It costs 3. It's a super rare. And your characters get +2 strength this turn. Whenever one of your characters with Reckless, Maui, challenges another character this turn, gain 2 lore. Very interesting card, no doubt about it. It obviously doesn't draw, and it is an action card. A lot of the time, action cards which don't draw are not that good, but this is a very powerful ability, potentially. Of course, if you have an abundance of Reckless characters, Maui is the most obvious one, but maybe like Felicia, which is this 1-cost Ruby card, and you have an abundance of card draw, you could make this work. I'm not super convinced. It's a very interesting card, no doubt. I think if this was in a different ink color, maybe. Like, I'm not sure Ruby necessarily needs the extra strength, but it's got to be all right, hasn't it, really? If you're playing this in a deck with an abundance of card draw, I think Ruby Amethyst is going to be the obvious place, but would I really play this in Ruby Amethyst? I'm not sure. Maybe some kind of Ruby Steel deck with a whole new world. I could see this being worth it. I don't know. It's a really interesting card. It's definitely good. I'm not super convinced by it, though. I really struggle with action cards which don't draw and don't give you like direct removal. This does, of course, give you some removal to an extent, and it gives you lore, so that is definitely a bonus. But it does seem a bit too niche for me, for my taste, but it's definitely one to keep an eye on. Up next, we have Rough Translation, Same Melody, which is a 2-cost inkable song in Sapphire, which removes up to 2 damage from any number of characters of your choice. So this card could absolutely pop off with Grand Pabby. I'm a bit of a Grand Pabby believer. Grand Pabby is a set 2 card in Sapphire. I think it's a 7-cost uninkable, which whenever you heal a character, gain 2 lore. So if you've got 6 characters which need healing, you could play this and you could gain 12 lore in one swoop with Grand Pabby. Now, obviously, that's going to be pretty outrageous if you can pull that off. But it is very interesting. It doesn't draw, so it's another one of those actions which is going to be pretty difficult to justify. But of course, if you were to play Amber and Sapphire with Grand Pabby, there's a lot of healing synergy with these 2 ink colors. It's a deck I've tried to build in the past and hasn't quite been there in set 3. I've not tried it in the 4th set. But it's definitely a card to keep an eye on, I think, in an Amber, Sapphire, Grand Pabby deck. If you're playing Ariel, which there's quite a lot of nice options like Let It Go. Ariel is quite a nice combo in Amber Sapphire. You've got Mama Odie, which is this 3-cost uninkable card, which whenever you play a song, you put the top card from your inkwell face down and exerted. So I think this card has some potential. I'm actually really excited about this one. I'm not super... Obviously, Amber Sapphire is not a competitive color combination and never really has been. But maybe one day. Grand Pabby is a card I believe in, and I'm definitely going to be testing out with this card. Up next, we have Flora the Good Fairy. 3-cost inkable in Emerald with a 2/4 stat line at quest for 1. Pretty good stat line. A vanilla stat line for a card like this would quest for 2. So if the ability is good, it could be played. While being challenged, this character gets +2 strength. So I don't think it's very good, to be honest. It's a 4/4 when challenged, but it's a 2/4 when challenging, which means it can be brawled. It only quests for 1. I personally would rather just have a 2/4 which quests for 2, I think, rather than a 2/4 with this ability which quests for 1. Don't fuss, dear. Flick of the wrist will turn these briars into something beautiful. See, I'm not convinced by the good fairy, but the fairy tag, maybe that could be relevant. Who knows? All right, up next, we've got 6 cards, 1 for each ink color combination. The first cards we looked at were the cards revealed today so far. We're going back a few days now, but the last card in today's video is so fascinating. It was revealed very late last night, so make sure you stick around for that one. And if you're enjoying the video, give it a like. Why not? Amber Chromicon, which is a 2-cost inkable item, and the ability is Amber Light. Exert, remove up to 1 damage from each of your characters. I've just talked about Grand Pabby decks potentially being decent. At the moment, there's Gumbo Pot in Sapphire, which is a 2-cost item, which you can exert once per turn, and you remove, I think, 2 damage from up to 2 characters. But this is a lot better with Grand Pabby. If you've got cards which are damaging themselves, there's real potential for Grand Pabby with this card, I think. I'm a big Grand Pabby believer. Amethyst Chromicon, which is a 2-cost inkable item, and you can exert, and each player may draw a card. Sounds good in a Jafar deck. It sounds very good in a Jafar deck. At the moment, there's Jafar's Lantern, or Lamp, not Lantern. There's Jafar's Lamp, which is a 2-cost uninkable item, which you have if you have a card called Jafar on the board, you can draw 2. The big problem with that card is it's uninkable, so you're forced to play it and lose a lot of tempo. And Jafar decks generally don't want that many uninkable cards because you end up just wanting to play as many Jafars down as possible, and then on turn 5 shift Jafar and then sing Whole New World. So I think this is a really nice card in a Jafar deck. I actually like the look of this card quite a lot. A lot. Also, if mill decks, Emerald Amethyst mill decks are ever a thing, which they could be with second star to the right, probably not. You probably would need to play Amethyst Steel, but there is the potential of a Jafar deck being like a double win condition deck where you have Jafar as one win condition and then mill as the other, because you can sing second star to the right and give your opponent 5 card draws and then sing a Whole New World and then mill them quite quickly, right? So I think this card is a really nice one. I'm going to play this in Jafar for sure. I love Jafar. I've been really wanting to play Jafar in set 5. There's even a Emerald Bucky Jafar deck, which I'm considering playing for my last set champs on Sunday. Probably won't go for it, but Jafar as a card I think has to be good at some point, and I think this is a really good support card for it. And next we've got the Steel Chromicon, which is a 6-cost uninkable item. Had a bit of a debate with a person on Twitter about this one. Shout out to them for the interesting Lorcana discussion. Their point was this is way too expensive and it's bad. And it's like one of the worst cards ever. I would strongly disagree with that. While I don't love the look of it, I do think this card has potential. Dealing 1 damage per turn is really good. There's obviously the Plasma Cannon, I think it's called, which is a 2-cost uninkable. And I think it costs 2 to deal 1 damage each turn. So the Steel Chromicon, you pay 6 for it and you're done, right? And then once per turn, you can deal damage. You could also play this with Scrooge McDuck for free in a Sapphire Steel deck focused around items. There's also Magicka Dispel synergy where she can quest for 6 with a Steel Chromicon down on the board. So there's some synergies potentially. But I have to say, I don't mind the look of the card at all. I think it's a really, really powerful ability, and I can see why it's a 6-cost uninkable. Of course, that is a big price to pay, but it's a strong card, and I wouldn't be surprised if you could play this as a one-of in certain specific decks. Of course, there's Steel, Emerald, Robin Hood decks, which are really relying on damage pings. I think this card is a one-off. You could make it work, especially if you're playing Hidden Inkcaster and this is suddenly inkable. Are you going to be playing Hidden Inkcaster? Probably not, but there's definitely ways you can make this card better than it looks on the surface. We've got the Emerald Chromicon, 3-cost uninkable item, Emerald Light. During opponents' turns, whenever one of your characters is banished, you may return chosen character to their player's hands. So when it's your opponent's turn, if they banish one of your characters, you may return chosen character to their player's hands. So either your opponent's or yours. That's pretty powerful, isn't it? It's like a Mother Knows Best with a repeated ability, but only your opponent's kind of in control of it. So let's say, for example, they remove one of your cards, then they could play like the big card. So you can only bounce back something that's not very good. But I think this might be good. It is an uninkable item. Of course, if there's lots of items in the meta, cards like Benja are going to become more popular. But this has a lot of potential, I think. I'm liking a lot of these items. Sapphire Chromacon is a 4-cost uninkable as well, which enters play exerted, which means you're not going to be able to tap it instantly. You're going to be able to exert it on turn 5. And then Sapphire Light, you can exert it, pay 2 ink, banish one of your items, gain 2 lore. So you're spending 2 ink to gain 2 lore, but you can't use it until turn 5. It doesn't seem bad to me. In a heavy Sapphire item deck, there's a lot of Sapphire item synergy with cards like the Queen, Scuttle, these kinds of things. There's obviously the Porpsicles. If you pair it with Steel, you've got the Fortispheres, which are very cheap and easy to banish. It's got potential. It really does. The Ruby Chromacon, 1-cost inkable. Exert. Chosen character gets +1 strength this turn. That's pretty good with Maui. At the moment, we've seen the Vitalisphere seeing play, which is a 1-and-done card. This just seems very good in Ruby Sapphire, doesn't it? This seems amazing. Suddenly your Maui is 7 strength. And what is the biggest problem for Ruby Sapphire decks right now? Queen's Castle. This card is probably the best of the bunch, actually. This just seems like an auto-include card in Ruby Sapphire, actually. This is a phenomenal card. So, just scanning back through them, this one seems like it could be good to enable a Grandpappy deck. This seems like it could enable Jafar. This is very expensive, but I could see it in the right deck. This seems interesting too, even though it is uninkable. Giving Emerald some control options might be nice. Maybe in a mill deck, for example, being able to bounce back cards to your opponent's hand repeatedly sounds really interesting. Also, you could maybe replay a card which you really want to in a mill deck, maybe like a Lady Tremaine or something to get yourself another Whole New World. This one has potential as well in a heavy item deck, and this one just seems good with Flaversham. So I really like all of these cards. A lot of the time you'll know in these videos I'm not that keen on many cards, but all 6 of these Chromacons I think have serious potential. So that's really interesting. Up next, we've got a 4-cost uninkable Rafiki, which is a 1/4 that quests for 2, and it has Rush. Surprising skill, when you play this character, he gains Challenger 4 this turn, so it's a 5/4 the turn it rushes in. Close to Maui stat line, right? Maui's a 6/4, but then Rafiki has the ability of being able to quest for 2 each turn. Of course, okay, it is uninkable, but it can come down a turn sooner, and then it's not as impressive once it is on the board, right? You're not going to want to challenge with it multiple times, but you can even bounce it. This card is very good. I am a huge fan of this Rafiki card. Oh, the reveals today are very, very nice. This looks like a great option. Admittedly, Amethyst, we've talked about it before, in the 4-cost has a lot of competition. Queen's Castle, Merlin Rabbit, Merlin Goat, Dolores Madrigal. There's now this new Madamim Elephant, which we looked at in the last video. This is another card into the mixer, but it looks very, very good. Questing for 2. Woo. Questing for 2 with control is something you don't find very often, right? So I like this card a lot. A lot. Simba, Adventurous Successor. I don't like this card. I love the artwork by Valentin Palombo. It's a 1-cost uninkable with a 2/1 stat line, which quests for 1. So it is 1 willpower less than a vanilla stat line card. And I laugh in the face of danger. When you play this character, chosen character gets +2 strength this turn. So it's not a 1-cost card you want to play on turn 1. That just makes it nearly unplayable in my opinion. Perhaps if there's some Simba shifts, which I don't believe we've seen yet, this would become better, but I don't like this card at all, actually. If this was inkable, I still wouldn't like it particularly, I think. But as an uninkable, I would say it's pretty unplayable. It's actually one of the worst character cards I've seen in Disney Lorcana, which is a hot take, but I think it's that bad. It's a 1-cost character you don't want to play on turn 1. It doesn't draw you a card. It's uninkable, so it's stuck in your hand. It just seems really, really poor to me. Tropical Rainforest is a new location, 3-cost inkable emerald card. It costs 1 to move there. It has 6 willpower and it gains 1 passive lore a turn. Snack time. Opposing damage characters gain reckless. That's very interesting. This card seems good to me. You don't obviously really need to move anything into the rainforest. 6 willpower on turn 3 is not bad at all. 1 passive lore per turn is not bad, and it's a very interesting ability. Seems obviously like it would be best suited in an Emerald Steel deck, but Emerald Steel Mill would love this card. Mill is a deck which I do find fascinating. I haven't really played it on my channel, but before I was making content in set 2, it was my favorite deck, even though it was very bad. And the idea of a mill deck is if you are able to deck out your opponent, so your opponent has no cards left in their deck and they draw a card, they lose the game. So really, the objective of a mill deck is control your opponent's questing as much as possible while forcing them to draw cards. And this is a great way of controlling your opponent's questing, because even if you can't remove all their characters, if you can just damage them, they're unable to quest. Having said that, if they have Reckless, the Tropical Rainforest probably isn't going to stick around for that long. So I'm not sure how good it is. I think it's a very interesting card, though. I think it has potential. A lot of the locations, I think, are quite easy to write off very early on. But I don't think this is such a location. I think this one has potential. There is some Emerald location synergy with some cards, which we've never really seen utilized. There's also John Silver from Into the Inklands, which I think is a phenomenal card. So the more locations that come out, the more a John Silver deck has to be seriously considered. I think this one might not be great, but it has potential. I think it might end up not seeing competitive play, but definitely a card worth checking out. Okay, up next we've got Namiri, which is a rare. 9 cost uninkable, which quests for 3. 5/5 stat line. It's a resolute daughter is the translation. And the ability is, I don't have any other choice. For each opposing character that was banished in a challenge this turn, you pay 2 ink less to play this character, and it has resist 3. So it's like a 5/8 in many ways, but slightly better than that. That is a phenomenal stat line that quests for 3. Very comparable to a Cinderella Stout-Hearted. It is uninkable, but you are going to be able to play this very, very cheaply in the right deck. If you can remove 2 of your opponent's cards in a challenge, suddenly this 9 cost Namiri is going to cost 5. And that's pretty strong, isn't it? There's also, I think this has potential in like a Ruby Steel deck, which we haven't really seen Ruby Steel have too much success. But this would be an absolute unit of a card. You could sing Whole New World with it. It's questing for 3. It's incredibly difficult to remove. It is in range of World's Greatest Criminal Mind, but World's Greatest Criminal Mind is not a particularly common card. Of course, you do see it in some decks, but it's not like it's everywhere. I think this card has a lot of potential. It is uninkable, but you're able to consistently play it for 7, but moreover, you can pretty often play it for 5. If you're playing this card, you're going to have a lot of challenges. Things like medallion weights, where you're drawing cards every time you challenge Queen of Hearts in Ruby. That's why I'm kind of wondering if it could be a Ruby Steel card, because you're wanting to challenge in a deck like that anyway. It has potential. I don't think you'd play many copies of it, but similar to Chernobog, you could maybe play 1 or 2. Possibly. It's got potential, no doubt. It's a huge stat line. Up next, we have the Potion of Strength, which is a 1-cost inkable item, which is always, of course, worth considering the potential of a card like this in a Sapphire deck because of Flaversham. So you can pay 1 ink to banish this item, and a chosen character gets +3 strength this turn. If a villain character is chosen, they get +4 instead. So I would much rather play the other Ruby item that costs 1, which we looked at, which you can just use once per turn for 1 strength. I think that card is significantly better than this one. So I don't think this one's going to see any competitive play. I actually would quite like the look of this one. I also think the Vitalosphere, because that card gives Rush, is better than this one. So as a result, I don't think this one's going to see play. If it was in a different ink color, I would be more interested in it, but this is very similar to 2 already existing 1-cost Ruby items. And my gut feeling, my initial impression is this is the weakest of the 3. We have Simba Lost Prince, which was Alphonse's card reveal, I believe. It's a 3-cost inkable, 2/4 stat line quest for 1. So again, you would want 1 more lore for a vanilla stat line on this card. So its ability really needs to make up for that 1 lore that you're not getting. During your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you may draw a card. Well, that is a very strong ability, and as a result, I think this card could see some play. In particular, in a deck which has 3-cost songs, because it only quests for 1, you'd be quite happy to sing 3-cost songs of this if you're not able to challenge. Its ability is similar to Jafar Dreadnought, but it's cheaper, and that's pretty important. It's a card which might stop your opponent from questing when they want to. That's going to be powerful in its own right, of course. If Simba Shifts come into the game, it becomes an interesting option as well. It can sing Strength of a Raging Fire, Storm Rage On, which are great options already in Steel, Friends on the other side. has potential for sure. Up next we have Denia, the Avenging Brother, whose name I probably butchered. It's a 5-cost uninkable, 7/5 stat line quest for 2. You'll pay for what you've done. I'll track you all the way to the Azurite Sea if I have to. Yeah, I don't think so. It's uninkable. It does have a good stat line that quest for 2, but being uninkable with no ability, probably not really going to cut it. If it quested for 3 and had slightly less stats, I would be more interested in it. Up next we have Tanana, the Wise Woman, which is a 2-cost inkable in Sapphire, 1/3 stat line, which quests for 1. Your brothers need guidance. When you play this character, you may remove up to 1 damage from chosen character or location. So there's some potential synergy again with Grandpappy, but I don't really believe in this card at all. It's just not doing enough for a 2-drop. It's not drawing you cards. It's not ramping you. I think that Sapphire just doesn't have room for a card like this. Next we have Took, the Northern Moose, which is a 4-cost inkable. The formatting on a few of these cards coming up is a bit odd, like as in the border's too wide. That's just going to be an error with the images I have. The border's not going to look different on these, just to make sure that's clear. It's a 4-cost, 4/4, the quest for 1. It's a vanilla card with a not very impressive stat line. I would much rather a vanilla card with just, quests for 2 or 3 than just raw stats. We have Rut, the Northern Moose, which is a 3/4, which quests for 1, but has support. So you have 1 less strength, but you have support. Support probably sounds a bit better, but I'm not really too impressed by this either. We have Kanai, the Big Brother, which is a 2-cost inkable, 1/4 stat line, which quests for 1. Brothers forever. While this character is exerted, your character's named coda can't be challenged. You have to look after your little brother no matter how big of a pain he is. Obviously depends on how good coda cards are. We're looking at coda card next, and the coda card that we've seen so far I'm not that impressed by, unfortunately. I think all these Brother Bear cards, which is a new addition to Disney Lorcana, are not very good. Here is Coda, the Talkative Cub. It's a 2-cost inkable, 2/1 stat line, which quests for 2. It's a rare. So a vanilla stat line card of this would have 2 willpower. So if it's got a good ability, this could be a really good card. During your opponent's turn, you can't lose lore. Doesn't seem great, does it? Maybe one day, if there's a meta deck which is really utilizing cards like Lyle, Tiberius, Roke, which are trying to lose you lore, then Coda becomes much more interesting. But until then, I doubt it. Unfortunately, Coda. Up next, we have a 4-cost inkable vanilla stat line. Cha-Cha, the Impressive Daughter, 4/3, quest for 2. Look, my tooth is even looser today. I much prefer this card if we just compare that to the Took and the Rut. Rut has support, which is nice. Took has 1 less willpower than Chaka, but Chaka quests for twice as much. So I much prefer this card, but I still don't think it's going to see play. We have the Royal Tantrum, which is a 4-cost uninkable action. It's a rare in Sapphire. Banish any number of your items, then draw a card for each item banished this way. When Flavisham exists, it's hard to see a world in which you're going to be putting a uninkable Royal Tantrum in your deck. We have Chicha, the Dedicated Mother, which is a 2-cost uninkable, 2/1 stat line quest for 1. It has support, and during your turn, when you put a card into your Inkwell, if it's the second card you put into your Inkwell this turn, you may draw a card. This is a wild card. This is an insane card. It's got so much going for it. It is uninkable, but it's a 2/1 which quests for 1 and has support, which is pretty good. You wouldn't play it just for that, but that's not bad. I mean, if you compare it to Philatites from set 1, that was an inkable 3/1 that quests for 1 with support. So this one's uninkable, and it has 1 less strength than Philatites, but its ability is so strong that you're absolutely happy for that kind of trade, or that shuffling around of stats. So during your turn, whenever you put a card into Inkwell, if it's the second card you put into your Inkwell this turn, you may draw a card. Wow. Fishbone Quill loves this card. One Jump Ahead loves this card. You could play her on turn 2. You wouldn't really want to exert her, to be honest, but play her on turn 2. Play Fishbone Quill on 3. Ink a card naturally. Draw a card. So you ink and draw. That is wildly good. This just seems like a staple card in Sapphire in many ways. Fascinating card. I think this one's going to be worth a few quid. That's for sure. Wow. This card's great. Up next, we've got Maleficent Vengeful Sorceress, which is a vanilla stat line card, which quests for 2. There are no currently Shift Maleficents, but that's something to bear in mind. One bit of synergy that is worth pointing out is with the Amethyst Diablo, which I believe is a 1-2 that quests for 1, or maybe a 2-1 that quests for 1, which reads whenever you play a card named Maleficent, I think you can look at the top 2 cards of your deck, put one on the top, one on the bottom. So there's some potential there. Maybe if you're playing a Amethyst Emerald Diablo deck, you could use the Amethyst 1-drop Diablo as well as the Emerald 1-drop Diablo for some consistent shifting. I think that shifting Diablo, now Bucky is gone, is going to be a very serious option because there's going to be considerably less answers to Diablo in the metagame. My take before the release of Diablo was it was the most overrated card in the game. I underestimated the power of the Bucky synergy. But now that Diablo is kind of old news, people are going to be playing it less, which therefore makes it inherently better because if people are playing it less, people are going to have less answers to Diablo. And I think that this card, considering its very subtle Diablo synergy, it's not bad. I mean, a 2-2 which quests for 2 is very vanilla and standard, but it's not a bad stat line at all. If there's obviously a Shift Maleficent that gets introduced in this set, then this is definitely one to keep more of an eye on. It's probably not going to be competitive, but there is the little Diablo synergy that I wanted to mention. Up next we have Don't Let the Frostbite Bite, which I believe was Ross's, one of my co-commentators for the Lorcana Challenges. I am going to be in Italy, in Bologna next weekend, so make sure you check out that stream. It's going to be on the official Disney Lorcana Twitch channel. Very excited for that. It's a 7-cost inkable song. So Ariel's not able to sing this, but the 4-cost Ariel in Amber can. Let's sing a 7. Ready all your characters, they can't quest for the rest of this turn. Very interesting. It's very expensive. Sing a 7 is not easy to achieve. Are you going to want to pay 7 for this? Probably not. I don't think it's very good. I think it's too expensive, but maybe there's some potential there in an Amber Ruby song deck, which I do think has some potential. As I mentioned, there's this 4-cost Ariel. Not really sure you would want to sing that with her. I suppose the thing to consider is if you were to sing this with Ariel, or whatever you sing this with will also ready itself. So that's kind of cool. But I'm kind of doubting it, to be honest. Up next we have Night Howler Rage, which is a 3-cost inkable action, not a song, which Ursula Deceiver of All would love this if it was. Draw a card. Chosen character gains Reckless during the next turn. This is another card which seems like it has potential in a mill deck. You are giving your opponent's characters Reckless, which denies them from questing, which is pretty much the objective of a mill deck, and you get to cycle your own hand. It's not bad. It's pretty expensive, obviously, to just give something Reckless, but giving like an opponent's Merfolk or Lilo Reckless is definitely got a lot of potential value. I actually quite like the look of this one. I think it's got potential in the right deck, but it's certainly not going to be like an auto-include card in Emerald. If it was a song, wow, it would be good, but it is just an action. Up next we have Gaston, which was my other co-caster, Lorcana Villain Baker's reveal, and it's a 9-cost uninkable, 10 strength. My goodness, I don't even know if I've ever seen a card with 10 strength before. Maybe there's like a Goofy or something that has 10 strength. 6 willpower. It's a villain. It quests for 2. It has rush, and its ability is for each damaged character you have in play, you pay 2 ink less to play this character. So obviously there's a lot of synergy potentially there with Ruby Amber, where you're playing Rapunzel's. So there's potential for this in a Mufasa. It has rush, by the way. Wow. 10-6 of rush. If you've got 2 damaged characters, it's going to cost you 5. This card seems very good. This card seems very, very good. I like this card a lot. I really like this card. I think this will see play. I like it a lot. 10 strength, 6 willpower with rush, and it quests for 2. And you can play it really cheaply. There's obviously the 1-cost Milan. There's Mother Gothel. There's also Beast. Wounded Soldier, I think it's called, which is a 3-cost. Lots of synergies there, potentially. I think this card's good. Merlin's Carpet Bag, which is a 5-cost uninkable item in Sapphire. So again, Scrooge McDuck maybe being an option for this. Majika Dispel being able to quest for 5 with Merlin's Carpet Bag on the board. It's very expensive for an uninkable item. You exert and pay 1 ink to return an item card from your discard to your hand. It's like a Tamatoa item. but it's uninkable. I'm not convinced by it, but maybe, I think again, with like if you're looking at a deck with Scrooge McDuck, you're looking at a deck with Magicka Dispel, it could be decent. Because I do actually like Magicka Dispel as a card quite a lot. The problem is with her, Lucky Dime was the only reasonable target for her, whereas a card like this, it's not terrible. The Sword Release, which is a 3-cost uninkable item in Ruby. This was revealed during the Lorcana Challenge on Sunday. It's a rare, power appointed at the start of your turn. If you have a character in play with more strength than each opposing character in play, each opponent loses 1 lore and you gain lore equal to the lore lost. So if, similar to Flynn Rider, Frenemy's ability, if you have the most strength character at the start of your turn, your opponent loses a lore and you gain 1 lore. If you're playing in a game with multiple players, it's going to be harder to achieve the ability for this because there's going to be more people that can offset and have a higher strength card than you, but you can gain more lore potential. I actually think this card's pretty good, even in just like a constructed 1 versus 1 game. It is uninkable, it is an item, but in a heavy item build deck where you want lots of items, this definitely could see play. I don't love it, but I don't hate it either. Elsa's Ice Palace, 3-cost uninkable location, costs 1 to move there. It only has 4 willpower, which is not a lot, so you've got to imagine its ability's good. It has 1 passive lore. Eternal Winter, when you play this location, okay, that's a new one. Choose an exerted character. While this location is in play, that character can't ready at the start of their turn. It's interesting, but I don't think it's very good because it's very uninkable. If it was inkable, it's like got very low, very small willpower. But it does, even if it's removed the same turn, it does still have value because it stops your opponent readying a character, which is pretty valuable. It might stop them questing for 2, something like this, right? So it is pretty interesting. It is very interesting, but I don't know. Again, maybe in like a full-on location deck with something like John Silver, so like a Steel Amethyst John Silver deck, it could be good. I think you're definitely going to need some more synergy than just what the card provides as a... You wouldn't just whack this in a deck for just value on its own, but if there's location synergies, it could happen. We have Glimmer versus Glimmer now, which is a 4-cost uninkable action. This is a very, very cool art by Ian McDonald. And it's banish chosen character of yours to banish chosen character. Hades, listen, kid. If I'm getting banished back to the lore book, you're going with me. Hercules will see about that. It's pretty good. I think it's pretty good. What's worth mentioning is that Ruby obviously has a lot of control options anyway. And I'm not sure there's that many characters which are just happy to banish. But if you were to imagine you're playing Ruby Amber and you use this on a Baloo, you banish your Baloo, gain 2 lore, and remove one of your opponent's cards. That's pretty spicy. If it was a song, it would be obviously even nicer in like a Ruby Amber kind of control deck with Ariel. So I'm not super sold on it. It is a pretty clunky card because it's uninkable and you require a character on your own side of the board you want to banish. It doesn't draw. But it's definitely interesting. I'm liking a lot of these cards actually in this set. This one's fascinating. 4-cost inkable Magicka Dispel, the Cruel Sorceress. So another shift target for the Magicka Dispel I've been talking about quite a lot. Currently the other Magicka Dispel is a 2-cost vanilla 2/3 stat line quest for 1. This is a 2/5 stat line with 1 lore. And during your opponent's turn, if an effect would cause you to discard 1 or more cards from your hand, you don't discard. So obviously a lot of people are going to say, why is this coming out after Bucky's banned? Well, probably it was designed way before Bucky was banned. Definitely it would have been. But this is still an interesting card. Discard is definitely a powerful ability. I don't think you're going to play this outside of a deck which has got the Shift Magicka Dispel, but I do really like the super rare Magicka from Into the Inklings. I think she has real potential. Now that there's a lot more items coming into the game, which are 5 or more, that are decent. And also not just the Lucky Dime, right? Before you would have to play it in a Sapphire Amethyst deck, but now maybe you could play Amethyst Steel with the 6-cost uninkable item in Steel, for example. So this card is interesting. I don't love the look of it, honestly, but I think with the Shift Magicka, there's potential. Shifting in with Magicka and questing for a whole bunch of lore instantly is very, very cool. Up next, we have Arthur, King Victorious. It's a legendary Floodborn Hero King. 7-cost uninkable, 3/6. 3 is always a dodgy number on strength because of Madame Medusa. Quest for 3. Shift After is very, very interesting though. The main Arthur which comes to mind is, of course, the Amethyst Arthur, which is a very good card, which doesn't see as much play as it probably should. One problem with that card is it's only got a 1/3 stat line, so it would be a very nice option to shift onto. And also you could quest of that Arthur, gain like 3 lore with the bounce a card back to your hand with the Arthur, and then shift on, potentially. Knighted by the King. When you play this character, chosen character gains +2 challenger and +2 resist. They can challenge ready characters this turn. Oh my goodness, that's spicy. And it's not when you shift, it's when you play. This card seems pretty good. It's causing an impact when it hits the board. It's a way of dealing with ward characters like Prince John, obviously the former Bucky, which is not going to be having ward anymore with the release of Shimmering Skies. But this card looks good. It's definitely an interesting one. It is very expensive if you're not shifting it. And I'm not sure how many Arthur cards there really are in the game that you want to play. But it's an interesting card, no doubt about it. I like the look of it somewhat. I don't love it. But it's definitely an interesting card. Also in a Amethyst Steel deck, you could maybe play Blue Fairy, which is, of course, going to draw for you whenever you play a Floodborn. Some synergy potentially there. Pretty cool. We've got Tippo, the Growing Sun, which is a 2-cost inkable 1/2, which quests for 1. So not a very good stat line, but if the ability makes up for it, of course, who cares? Measure Me Again. When you play this character, you may put a card from your hand into your Inkwell face down and exerted. Well, that's pretty good. That is pretty good. So it's like a 1 jump ahead with a body, but instead of the card coming from the top of your deck, it's from your hand. So it's kind of like a midi fishbone quill. But it's a ramp card. It does lower you 1 card in hand. But it could sing 1 jump ahead. I think in a Sapphire Steel deck where you're playing a whole new world and replenishing your hand quite quickly, this has potential. Very cool card. We have Basil's Magnifying Glass, which is a bit of a low-res image. Unfortunately, it's a 2-cost inkable item in Sapphire. It's a rare. Find what's hidden. Exert and spend 2 ink. Look at the top 3 cards of your deck. You may reveal an item card and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. So in a heavy item build, this is going to be a nice card draw engine. Looking at top 3 and putting an item into your hand. So Ariel looks at 4. And you usually need around like 20 items for her to be about 80% hit rate. This is looking at top 3, which is significantly less. So you're going to, in order for this to consistently hit an item, you're going to be looking at, I don't know, maybe like 25 to 30 items, which does seem like a lot. So in a very, very heavy item build, this could work. It's very expensive though. And you already have Flaversham. I'm not really convinced that you need this. And Maurice's Workshop. You pay for it, and then the fact that you have to pay for it later, but it is... Looking at 3 and putting 2 on the bottom, 1 in hand, is very, very powerful because you can really dig for what you're looking for. Okay, and the final card, which is the one I alluded to earlier, is absolutely wild. It is a uncommon, so it's not going to be expensive. It's a 4-cost inkable Alan Adale, the Rocking Rooster. 2/3 stat line quest for 2. Fan favorite, which is a fitting ability because I think you guys are going to love this one. Whenever you play a song, gain 1 lore. Thank you. Now here's a little ditty for our Floodborn friends that we call Martin and the Flood. This card just seems very, very good. If you compare it to Sleepy's Flute can gain you 1 lore per turn. Well, this can gain you so much lore per turn. You can say, if you sing 4 songs the turn you play Alan, you gain 4 lore before your opponent can remove it from the board. And then it quests for 2. This card seems phenomenally good. This is definitely one to keep an eye out for in aerial decks. Any aerial deck, which, of course, Amber Steel is the one we'll usually look at, but any aerial deck which has access to cards which are songs which draw, looks very good with this card. I think this card has huge potential, and I think it's going to see a ton of play. I think this card has so much potential in Amber Ruby, in particular, is one that instantly comes to mind. Amber Ruby Songs feels like it's almost good, but just lacking a little bit of something in terms of lore gain. Like Sleepy's Flutes in that deck feel quite clunky. Obviously, they're uninkable, whereas Alan is an inkable card. It can also sing songs itself, right? And it quests for 2. I think this card has huge potential in a wide variety of Amber aerial decks, potentially Amber Sapphire. I think this could open up the doors for some color combinations of Amber we're not used to seeing with songs. I really love this card. It looks fantastic. That's all we've got time for today. I think it was 38 cards. If you enjoyed and watched this far, the keyword in the chat, in the comment to let me know that you've watched the whole thing is the Rockin' Rooster. Thanks so much. See you very soon for more card reveals. We're almost got the whole set revealed, and then we can start the deck building streams, which I'm very excited for. Cheers.